We're live once again with the Dictators. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host and co-creator of this stream, David Dabata, and he has just recovered from his deathbed or near deathbed. So I'm delighted to see him back here in the flesh with something akin to a voice with which to express his strident and unfortunately mostly correct opinions, mostly correct because he's been saying what kind of a world we would end up in, and here we are. It's not over yet, but we are in a very disordered, very scary place. David, welcome.
Thank you very much. As you said, I had a bit of a bout, as they say, with bronchitis. I'm just telling people out there, don't get bronchitis. It's not fun. So I don't quite have all of my voice back yet, but for what I do have, I'm sure it'll irritate enough people in any event. But again, I'm glad to be back here. I'm glad to be back with Jonathan. I do, as he said, or maybe he didn't say, I'll say, have my own YouTube channel, which is No Delusion Zone. I don't allow people that are delusional on the No Delusion Zone. They get on sometimes anyway. And also my website, which is on Substack, protectingtherepublic.com. Please visit both sites and need your support as subscribers. So again, No Delusion Zone on YouTube and protectingtherepublic.com on Substack. As we have for the last, I don't know, couple of weeks or so, we're going to delve into the horror story that's Iran. Jonathan, I know that you have kept up with what's going on there, but I guess the latest that I have to start with today on this episode of The Dictators is the fact that Donald Trump has now threatened genocide. There's no other word for it. He has threatened genocide on the Iranian country, the Persian civilization. I'll just post what he said here on Truth Social. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That's what's known as genocide. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. However, blah, blah, blah. You can read the rest of this. And of course, he ends it by saying, God bless the great people of Iran, who he wants to eliminate off the face of the earth. But that's our dear friend Donald, who doesn't make any sense whenever he talks. But here we have the president of the United States of America threatening genocide, threatening to wipe an entire nation, entire civilization off the face of the earth. There is no other word for that than genocide. If we already haven't, Jonathan, the United States has lost any claim it has to a high moral authority, to an ethical nation. We're done. I mean, we were before, but comments like that by our dear leader, King Don, just further puts the nail in the coffin of any claim we have to being a righteous nation. It makes me sick.
And this, I think, is part of the point. Now, we'll come to how conscious Trump is of what he's actually doing and what it ladders up to. He's someone who lives in the moment. He's someone who lives in his own narcissistic bubble. He is someone who takes personal slights to heart. He is someone who lives in a world where he's constantly, I think, trying to feel the impact of his words in terms of the attention they can grab for him, his ego, his narcissism, and he's in this constant struggle, sensing strength and weakness in all those around. But it's almost as if he exists on the surface of reality, really not penetrating it without, prior context, without knowledge of history, without knowledge of all sorts of stuff. And there is the added element there, which one of our dear moderators has pointed out. There is the aspect of dementia, but it seems he has always existed on the surface of this bubble of his own narcissism. But behind the scenes, this isn't just the chaos of the world spinning and orbiting around his ego. We do see currents of purpose behind all this. And we have to ask who is benefiting from the situation. And then we have to go beyond that and ask, was there intentionality? Was there a plan behind it if, these certain powers are benefiting? Let's go through the list. Iran, ironic as it seems, is benefiting. Why is that? Or not Iran, the Iranian regime? Because they have an excuse. They've been given an excuse to double down on the persecution of their population. And during this period of war, that population is less likely to focus on unseating the regime. They're focused on their own survival at this point. So in a kind of strange way, the Iranian regime has benefited from the current crisis. They have more oil receipts and income. They have greater normalization of their terrorist regime than has happened at any time. And they even have, amongst sort of, the deluded extreme left, etc., a degree of sympathy for that regime. That is misplaced. It's a cruel and barbaric regime. It's not a cruel and barbaric people, though. And they have shown extraordinary bravery in standing up to this regime, in demanding a more democratic, pluralistic future. So the people of Iran should have our support and sympathy. Trump's words, of course, say the absolute opposite. But if we turn to who benefits, well, Iran is kind of benefiting. The regime is benefiting. Putin is benefiting. The spike in oil prices is the obvious one. If Ukraine hadn't been hitting their infrastructure, they'd be benefiting hugely from it. But actually, on a more strategic basis, Russia is benefiting because you have the US destroying its reputation internationally, trying to make its own allies complicit in the criminal war. They have refused to do so. It's driven a wedge between America and its allies in Europe. Greenland's back on the agenda, apparently. Threats against Europe, threats to crash NATO. And this appears to be maybe a catalyst which will allow Trump to push this through, or those who are guiding him towards these decisions to push the ultimate destruction of NATO through. As we've talked many times, and I've talked with my friend Jonathan Pierce as well, NATO's been in a kind of appeasement / holding operation, which I've said is a delusion and benefits nobody because it avoids real decisions being taken. But I can see why a lot of people wanted to believe that NATO is still a thing and wanted to try to appease the orange god to keep it going for a little bit longer. That turns out to be fruitless, and it is about to crash. The US, I think, is going to fall out of NATO. He couldn't trigger a crisis in Greenland. He got too much internal opposition within the Republican Party, within the US, within the legislature, and it seems within the tech bro community. Apparently, he had significant pushback to his threats against Greenland. He couldn't trigger the collapse of NATO through that, so he's had to find others. It may have come as a surprise to him that Iran is that perfect trigger. I don't think it will have come as a surprise to the nefarious forces who have pushed him into or prompted him into this. What I'm calling this episode is the Axis trap for Trump, because I suspect actually that there is far more intentionality behind dragging the US into this war than just Trump's deranged decisions himself. I suspect there have been various plots and machinations to push the US towards this, to suck weapons out of Europe, to create a divide between the US and Europe, and to get the US bogged down in this quagmire in the Middle East, absorbing their money, their weapons, their attention. Why? Why would such a trap be beneficial to Russia and China? Well, it leaves the way open. It leaves the way open to attack Europe. It leaves the way open to blockade Taiwan. The pieces are moving on the board. And that's my hypothesis. I'm going to throw it back to you because I've talked myself hoarse.
Well, we're both going to lose our voice here pretty soon, so we've got to ration it. Look, I agree with what you said, but I want to just go back a little bit to what you said about what unintended benefits this may have for Iran. Not everyone, I'll say, but many people, certainly Trump, thought that the Iranian regime, the entire country was just going to fold in a few days. They were just going to bow down to Trump and the superior American weaponry, our technology, and just beg to surrender to America. Of course, that didn't happen, and I predict it's not going to happen. But one unintended benefit that I think many people did not count on was the rise in, authority, respect. The fact that Iran now is a much bigger player on the international stage than it was before the war. They're not only bigger on the regional stage, the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, and so forth. They are now a player on the international stage. Why? Because they've stood up to the great Satan and the little Satan, both Israel and America. All they have to do is survive. They've not only survived, they've lashed out. I won't say they've thrived, but they are still attacking Israel, certainly, and other nations in the Gulf state, as well as American facilities in the Middle East, in the Gulf state. So a very big unintentional consequence for Iran, aside from the fact that they're now making more money on their oil than they did before the war, is that they are now a bigger player on the international stage. I won't say they're respected. They have a horrible regime. They have a dictatorial, violent, repressive regime. But because of their ability to withstand the attacks by Israel and the United States, their prestige in terms of a nation has come way, way up. I don't think anybody predicted that. You mentioned the players in the background that are working to destroy our relationships. NATO, for example. Here's one of the best friends of both you and me, J.D. Vance, with another friend, Orban. He's there right now trying to shore up support for the upcoming election in Hungary, which is very close, by the way, for those who may not be following it. Orban has a chance of losing. And I believe he's been in power, Jonathan, was it 16 years? And he has a chance, at least more than any time during all those years, of actually losing. And J.D. Vance is there to shore him up, to make sure that that a friend of Putin and Trump is victorious, another far right-wing authoritarian. And of course, that's disgraceful. I just quickly want to throw in the fact that talking about Iran going up in the eyes of the world, not for being a humanitarian nation, but again, for withstanding the attacks. The United States, of course, has gone way down. I can say with a fair degree of certainty that we will not have any bases pretty soon in the Middle East. All the work that we've done over the decades to produce goodwill and to support our allies in the Middle East, and by pouring billions and billions of dollars into infrastructure, I believe is all going to be washed away very, very soon. And we probably won't have any footprint at all, or very, very little, very soon, in the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf, however you want to refer to it. That's a tragedy on a whole different level.
And, all these, MAGA claims that Trump is playing 4D chess, which of course,
BS.
He's not.
He can't play checkers. Come on.
He can't play checkers, let alone normal chess, etc. But it shows how far the mighty have fallen. We've gone from Nixon in China, which perhaps is one of the heights of not just the craft of diplomacy, but also long-term strategic thinking in the 1960s. Realizing that you don't want to be tackling China and Russia, two fronts of the Soviet Union, so you peel China away and you essentially try to craft an ally in the way we crafted an ally out of Japan. Well, it hasn't quite worked that way, but that certainly is the height of diplomacy. Fast forward, 60 years or whatever it is. How long is it? 80? Well, no, not quite 80 years. Yeah, fast forward 60 years, we have Vance in Hungary. Hungary, the poorest and most corrupt country in the European Union by a long chalk. It didn't have to be that way. I mean, Hungary has a tradition of high-end engineering, manufacturing, sophisticated architecture, culture, etc. It could have been one of the leading economies in Europe. It could have been on an extraordinary trajectory in the way that Poland has been. Why not? All the elements were in place for that economic miracle. But no, they elected a kleptocratic, Kremlin-friendly toad who has stripped that country of its opportunity and potential for the present. And here we have the US toadying up to the toad. The Hungary, which essentially is a Kremlin asset in Europe. I just find this extraordinary. I mean, not only is there not 4D chess taking place, it seems that every move that is being made is expressly designed to degrade the US in the eyes of its allies and degrade its capabilities diplomatically, strategically, militarily.
I agree with you. And as you and I have discussed many, many times, including just off air here today, Donald Trump doesn't have either the strategic or the tactical mind in order to coordinate what you've just said, which is to further be a conduit for the disintegration of the United States power in the Middle East, for the disintegration of NATO. He doesn't have the ability to do that. And when I hear talks of 4D chess, it just makes me laugh. That's all. I can't get sick or nauseous. It makes me laugh because the man, has some serious mental deficiencies way before he ever developed any cognitive disabilities, including dementia. But there are people, and we've talked about this, that surround him that absolutely are smart enough and devious enough and evil enough to be working with Russia, to be working with the Kremlin, to be working with China, to be working with Orban, to coordinate all of this behind the scenes. And I totally believe you, Jonathan. I think that this is, and this is not a conspiracy theory. It's not that hard to figure out. This is something that has been coordinated to to destroy America's prestige, their power, their honor, their trust in the Middle East and in Europe, basically to isolate the United States. So Russia can do what it wants to continue in Ukraine with no support from America. For China, not so much to invade Taiwan. I actually don't think that's their main goal right now. China is and always has been about business, about keeping things flowing. Going with the flow so they can become richer, so they can control more of the pie. They don't want to destroy the international economic system. They want to keep it. They want to be on top of it. So they're not there to destroy it.
Yeah, I'm not sure they want to actually keep it exactly the way it is, because a free and level playing field doesn't exactly fully
I'm not saying that at all. But if they destroyed it, then there would be no economic system to be in control of. They want to mold it to what they want, which is China being in control. But the fact of the matter is they want an international economic system because they want to control it. They're not against internationalism in the way that America first is, and all the loonies here in the United States, where we want to build a wall around ourselves, thinking that we don't need anybody. What did Trump just say again for the millionth time? We don't need your oil. We don't need anybody. Okay, so why are we bombing the hell out of
drones?
Why are we bombing the hell out of Iran? Why do we need Karg Island? Why do we need anything then? No, it's insane. There are people in the Trump administration all around him that are, I believe, coordinating with the apparatchiks in the Kremlin, in Beijing, and elsewhere to try to destroy America, period. And certainly to destroy our relationship with NATO, Ukraine, and basically our allies all over the world, including Asia.
I think I got a slight dissent because I kind of suspect that Taiwan is not off the table. I think
it's not off the table. I agree.
What they've seen, though, is that a land-based invasion, and actually if the US does go into Karg Island or other places, because it's not by no means given that that's going to be the only target. And in fact, just doing that as a target perhaps makes no strategic sense whatsoever. We'll turn to that in a minute. We'll turn to the purge of the US military. I can't believe we're not talking about sort of China or North Korea here, but there is a purge underway of the US military. But I think China is looking at this thinking that a blockade of Taiwan could work, whereas a direct invasion may prove to be too costly and the optics of it too destructive. So I think possibly, if the Iran crisis worsens and worsens significantly, then we could see China playing a more active role, possibly opening up the Strait of Hormuz, using its own naval resources in conjunction with Iran, and thereby taking over essential control of that waterway. Strategically, that would make an awful lot of sense, including the Red Sea as well. China starting to actually physically take over the logistical nodes that previously were under the framework of US free trade policies with the implicit sort of threat of its large naval presence. Well, this makes sense because if they want to take over that global trading network, then it's much easier. And this is Sun Tzu, isn't it? You get your enemies to fight first. You get enemies to exhaust themselves.
Mhm.
You have others fight the war for you. So
Yep.
then when you step in, you're not seen as the aggressor, and indeed you're the only power remaining. So I feel things are going to get an awful lot worse. Under the guise of that, they could perhaps make a move on Taiwan without any of the blowback that would happen if they were doing that, let's say, out of a clear blue sky when the US wasn't distracted in other arena. The other one, now, the US, of course, is still motivated by money. Even the MAGA is motivated by money, as is Trump and his elite. So if there weren't money-making opportunities, they won't be interested in any of this. Now, one could almost see that as, I don't see it as a positive in this sense, but it is at least something constructive. It is pointing towards at least that they have some kind of not totally nihilistic desire to burn the world down. Making money, when it's in a lawless fashion, is not great, but is not out and out nihilism. Russia, however, is a place that would burn the world down in order to control the ashes. Again, quoting Sun Tzu, it has a deeply nihilistic core, but has no actual sort of moral framework or limitations whatsoever. So I think we've got three competing kind of views of the world at play here, even amongst the Axis authoritarians. And unfortunately, China is going to be thinking very strategically about whether it can use Russian nihilism and American the greed of this administration and allow them to undermine themselves. So when it steps in, it is no longer facing such a direct confrontation. This is all coming to a head. I mean, China, as we've posted in the comments here, has known these things probably are coming one way or another, and has stocked up to an extraordinary extent on minerals, resources, food, oil, and so on. But even then, its sources are not infinite. It could probably withstand, a good few months of global trade blockades, but it cannot go on indefinitely. So we've said this before again. I feel all of this is coming to a head, and it also has to come to a head before the midterms in the US, and Trump is potentially, finally, held to account for some of his crimes and misdemeanors.
Well, we've said it before, as you just mentioned, and I'll say it again. I believe that the biggest winner out of this is going to be China. And I actually don't disagree with you. Look, Taiwan is definitely on China's radar. Whether or not they invade it tomorrow or 6 months from now, I don't know. Nobody knows. But I think they're going to make a move. This certainly has sweetened the pot in terms of when they can do that. It's going to be sooner rather than later. Now, Jonathan, just look at Europe, for example, NATO. They're already considering the possibility that they're going to have to go to China for their energy needs. That since they've cut off, or tried at least to cut off, Russia, and since Iranian oil, Middle Eastern oil is going to be cut off, and they don't want to do any more business with America more than absolutely necessary, they're looking at China being their main partner now. And that's going to happen in many, many other regions, certainly in Asia. And as we've said weeks ago, when this first started, I think we're in the 39th or 40th day of this horror show now, this war. China's just sitting back, and they are gleaning so much information, so much intelligence, military intelligence about the weaponry, the tactics, and the strategy that the United States and Israel is using in Iran, our weapons platforms, how and when we're using them, where, our deployments, our logistics. If nothing else happens, they've already gained a wealth of knowledge about that. But after we do shoot ourselves out and knock heads and diminish ourselves, then they are going to step in. They're going to come out of this as the major player. And they do want to control the world economy. As I said, I in no way believe they want to destroy it. And they don't want to keep it the way it is. They want to bend it to their own means. They want to be number one. And after this is all over, I think Donald Trump has forced that into their hands. I think that he's going to allow them to be the major player, the major international economic powerhouse. It's really a tragedy. It really, really is. But I believe China is going to come out of this looking better and with more rewards than anyone out of all of the players in this, with the United States and possibly Israel being at the bottom of the heap.
And ordinarily, with the kind of managed decline that might have taken 20, 30, 40 years to achieve, we're seeing that happen in real time. We're seeing an accelerated collapse, I think, of US power, and it will be US military power at the moment. Technically, on paper, it's at its peak, but we're at a precipice point, I think, for a number of reasons. One is getting trapped in immoral but also unstrategic wars, of which this is. I mean, we can argue till the cows come home about the perhaps need to have reform in Iran and get rid of the theocratic regime, which is behind so many ills, so much misery in the world, and which has supplied Russia, let's face it, with the means to attack and kill so many Ukrainians. So it is a vile, evil, a vicious regime, which I think many of us would like to see the back of. But when you do it, you have to do it with a plan. You have to do it with extraordinary determination and a clear-sighted plan. One of the reasons that no US administration has contemplated up till now is that no one could formulate a plan which they thought had any chance of working. And I think that's a significant detail. That brings us on to, and there was a comment just on the screen here, we've had military purges in China, which were pretty dramatic. We have constant military purges in Russia. That's nothing new. Convicting people of various charges from embezzlement to treason, etc. Well, that's how Russia has always done things. We are now getting purges in the American military. What do you know about this? And is it because there is growing disquiet at, one, the lack of plan, two, the risk of actually being given orders that are downright criminal?
It's a great question. It's something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't get enough attention. It's a couple of things, Jonathan. Originally, way before the war in Iran was even contemplated, or at least put into action, the reason that the purges started here in the United States had solely to do with racism. I'm sorry, but look at it. Who were the people that were originally purged? They were black generals, black officers, and they were immediately removed, or women. So many black officers, generals, and many general flag officer females, women were purged, were removed from the roles immediately. After that, it was also the JAG officers, hundreds of judge, advocate, generals, lawyers, the military lawyers were also fired or reassigned. Two reasons for that. One was just, I'm sorry, out and out racism. Christian nationalism has gripped the United States military under Pete Hegseth, who has I'm not sure what it's called. Forgive me if I'm wrong. The Star of Malta, or the Cross of Malta on his arm, which was a medieval Christian symbol of the Crusades. He is a born-again fanatic and a full-fledged Christian nationalist / racist. And so he started purging the United States military of black and female flag level general officers, and then the legal staffs. The reason for that being he wanted total control, do away with the lawyers. As Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers. Trump and Hegseth wanted full control, and they didn't want our American military led by African Americans and women. Just couldn't have that in a Christian nationalist America. Just now, and this is only in the last few weeks, we're starting to see some pushback from American senior officers. And so we're starting to see some purges that are based on the fact that some of our officers are actually saying, wait a minute, that's illegal. That's unconstitutional. I'm not sure if we should do that, sir. So we're going to start to see those kinds of purges, the kinds of purges you're talking about in Russia and China, stuff that's been going on forever. We're starting to see that here now, but it started as flat out racist and sexist purges, which has now gone into control, with the legal officers being fired. Now it's gone into just strict control. Anybody that doesn't agree with the illegality of what's being asked of the American military, and they are being asked and have been asked to commit war crimes, to do things that are unconstitutional. And Jonathan, if senior officers, any military really, goes into Iran now after the president of the United States said on the record that we're going to eliminate the entire civilization of Iran, the Persian civilization, that's genocide. And if they take part in that, I'm sorry, that's a war crime. I'm not saying that every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine should refuse their orders. I'm just saying that if they do that, they're going to be committing war crimes. And that's a real dilemma for anyone serving in uniform. And I certainly wouldn't want to be serving right now. And I certainly wouldn't want to be a commander who has to contemplate those orders without the assistance of my legal staff, my judge advocate general assistants, who probably have been fired.
That's it. And also contemplate the almost inevitability that you will be fired, you will be stripped of your wage, you'll be stripped of your dignity, what you've, in many cases, people would have, dreamed the whole lives of attaining the ranks.
Take their pension away.
Strip them of their pension and any perks. Their family may live in military communities from which they'll be ejected with, one would assume, subsidized housing and all the rest of it. It's almost like, those who contemplate, leaving a particular region. You're essentially going to be leaving everything behind. But in this instance, it's for a point of principle. And that point of principle is embedded for many people, I think, in the reasons why they joined the military,
yes.
The reasons why they take pride in the military, that very understanding that they are representing not just the people of the United States, but the values that it supposedly enshrines. For some people, that will become an almost impossible dilemma to square.
Absolutely. And again, I would not want to be in the shoes of the commanding officers, certainly the commanding generals, those that at the theater level that actually have to implement these orders coming down from Washington to invade a country, to commit genocide, or to just slaughter people, bombing the bridges and bombing all of the power plants that Trump has threatened to do, whether or not they actually blow up the entire country, are war crimes, major war crimes in and among themselves. And I know there's tens of millions of Americans that are saying, yeah, do that. We should have done it before. Kill every last Iranian. Well, I heard the same thing in Iraq. Kill all the towel heads. All the horrible things that you hear. They're subhuman, blah, 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 blah. Just like the Untermensch, the Russians were Untermensch to the Germans. Well, everybody's always a subhuman when you're fighting someone, but this is America. We did and still do stand for something, and that any American soldier that willfully obeys illegal orders, that slaughters the innocents, and certainly an American president who threatens to eliminate an entire civilization and to bomb them back to the Stone Ages, obviously is a war criminal. Following a war criminal is a war crime. And I really can't say any more about that right now.
And the latest post is extraordinarily deranged. I find it difficult to understand how, well, we talked about this yesterday, and we're going over the same ground. I find it difficult to see how anyone can see that latest post and think that it is not befitting of the office, whether they support Trump or not. Look at that and see that as normal and reasonable and okay, when the last two tweets are extraordinarily deranged, contain incredible threats, threats to commit crimes that are against the Geneva Convention and the Conventions of War. There must be some in MAGA circles thinking, well, I'm normally with this guy, but yeah, he's going a little far. My question is, how far is too far? How much is too much? At what point do people say, I was okay with it up to now, but nope, this is it. This is a red line for me. I'm done here.
Well, I'm tired of people, American politicians, Jonathan, saying that behind closed doors, they're really upset. They're really pissed off. They're really disturbed. I'm sick of it. They need to come out in public and say, 25th Amendment, get rid of this deranged son of a bitch. He's crazy. He is driving this nation to ruin. He's already done it, but we need to get him out of here before it gets any worse. He's also going to drive other nations into ruin, physically by bombing them like we are, but also economically by forcing recession or depressions in some countries based on his insanity. No, I'm sorry. The MAGAs that are behind the scenes saying, oh, we're very worried, need to get their shit together and say it in public and vote to get this asshole out of office. I can't say it any stronger than that. This is unbelievable. This is the worst nightmare I could ever have imagined for my country.
And this, I think, we're going to be talking a lot more about in future episodes. This is, when does Maidan come to America, and whether there is a threshold number of people who object to this. We know that there's enough people who passively object to this. One presumes at least half the country are not particularly okay with what's going on. But the question which Maidan raises is, and we compare it to the revolution that nearly succeeded in Belarus, and that is, one, you need a threshold. Two, you need incredible, I would say, moral clarity that goes far beyond self-interest to motivate people into moving. And thirdly, you need a percentage of them to say, okay, well, not only are we going to protest, we're going to risk everything. We're going to risk our homes and our lives and our families and our communities, but we are going to stand up. We're going to barricade. We are going to put all our resource and all our human capital into now resisting this. And actually, there's a point where in Maidan where you say, this is no longer a legitimate government because they're no longer governing in our name. They're no longer governing based on what was promised. They are no longer governing to the interests of the country or governing towards its future interest. But in fact, they're doing everything possible to denigrate and tear it down. At some point, there has to be a Maidan moment. And if there isn't, it suggests to me that this is deeply worrying if people are not prepared to finally take to the streets and actually start to declare this regime illegitimate.
Let me tell you, Jonathan, why I think we're very, very far from that point, because when I speak about what we're speaking about here today, and I just talk about the facts about what Donald Trump has said and done, I get so many comments calling me a communist, calling me a fascist, calling me a traitor. And it's not just one or two, and it's not just some bots. As I say ad nauseum, there's tens of millions of Americans who have that opinion, who think Donald Trump is on the right track, that we should have been doing this all along for many, many years, that we've been a patsy, a chump, that America's always been taken advantage of. We've been too nice. And as Pistol Pete says, we shouldn't give our enemies any quarter. If they surrender and put their hands up, we should mow them down. If they kneel down in front of us, we should shoot them in the head. We should go back to medieval times. America's been too nice. And about half the country sports that. Tens of millions of Americans. So again, I hear what you're saying. But when, people like me, and there's not just me, there's millions and millions like me, but when we are attacked for being traitors and un-American, I just think that we're far away from the barricades and, storming the Bastille time. I wish we were there today, and with my strained voice, I will keep yelling from the rooftops, me and Malcolm Nance and millions of other Americans that are just sick to death of this and that are real Americans. But when it's going to change, when there's going to be some substantive action, I don't know, because the Republicans, I believe, are going to control the elections in November. They're not going to cancel them. They're going to control them, meaning they're going to put the DHS and the police and the feds around all the polling stations, intimidate voters, arrest potential voters, and worse, when it's all said and done, the Republicans, MAGA, will count the ballots. And if you count the votes, it doesn't matter how many people vote, you win.
I'm just trying to get a comment actually into the comments here without YouTube rejecting it. Whoa, okay. It's one of them's got through finally. I've tried about 6 variations of this. Apparently, it thinks anything that even vaguely suggests resistance to authoritarianism is spam. Apparently, it really doesn't like my comments here, but I've managed to sneak one through. We're at a dangerous point here, and I think it's on a geopolitical level as well as a domestic level. I had a conversation earlier. I mean, there'd be a lot to disagree with, but I had a conversation with Joe Linsley earlier, which is going up tonight on the channel. Where we agree here is that this Iran crisis should be a catalyst for Europe not to participate and become co-conspirators with Trump in this illegal war, but it should become a catalyst point for Europe to say, we're not going to join you in the war in the Middle East, but we are now going to defend European sovereignty,
Yes.
which means putting troops into Ukraine, on to say border duties to liberate Ukrainians from there, embed them with unmanned systems to learn the lessons, to put a battalion of European troops in Lviv, even just symbolically to say, we're here, and maybe start planning to close the skies over Western Ukraine. And even though Ukraine's doing an extraordinary job at that, just symbolically contribute to that effort. This should have been the catalyst point for Europe to say no to your Middle East war, but yes to the defense of Europe. We are now waking up to defend ourselves, our sovereignty, our territory, our interests, our values. Thank you, Mr. Trump, but we have a fight on our hands. And that, to an extent, he might not have liked that, but Trump reacts to strength, Russia reacts to strength, China reacts to strength.
Well, this
we
should have been.
We haven't used this.
The Iran war, instigated by Trump and Trump alone. Well, no, Netanyahu calling the shots for Trump, but Israel and Trump. This should have been a clarion call for Europe, NATO, and the EU to do just as you said, to do one of these, or as my Italian family likes to do, one of these to Trump, okay? And say, we're done. We are done. And then do exactly what you said, but I would go one step further, not just send a tripwire amount of forces, a battalion or a brigade to Ukraine. Send them what they need. Send damn forces. Find out what they need. First of all, close the damn skies over Ukraine. Just do it. No fly zone. Do you think Russia is going to attack all of NATO if there's a no fly zone over Ukraine? No. Putin's going to go away with his tail between his legs because he's a cowardly son of a bitch.
Yeah,
Close the skies over Ukraine.
The Baltics. He might think twice about making further moves on Europe. I mean, this is
exactly. And again, I understand the whole tripwire thing. Fine. Instead of putting a battalion there, put a damn division. Get 5 countries to put a division or more in eastern Ukraine and say, okay, you've got X amount of time to get all of your troops, get your ass out of Donbass. And they'd probably be happy to do that at this point, the Russians, and just have the NATO troops keep moving a little bit eastward after the skies are closed, and no missiles, no rockets, no drones come into Ukrainian airspace. And then see what the Ruskies do. I know what they'll do. They'll go, do svidaniya, and they'll head eastward back into their motherland.
They'll recalculate the benefit versus the cost, and they'll conclude that they do not have the resources to push further, to push into Europe. Europe's waking up. They've missed that window. But no, we haven't done any of these things, and we continue to exude
NATO has
absolute
to start
weakness.
doing it. Has to. I'm sorry. I know I'm getting emotional here, but
a subset of NATO. NATO is done. And we're going to cover that tomorrow because Trump's most recent comments suggest that finally what we've been predicting for the last 2 years is that NATO is a hollow zombie organization. Finally, I think that that may be brought to light. Not a surprise to us, but also it should trigger a whole set of responses from Europe. Let's see if it does, because if it doesn't, my goodness,
one of the first acts should be to send Mark Rutte packing. He's useless anyway. He's a Trump toady. Since NATO's useless and doesn't exist, bye-bye, Mark. Das Vidania.
Yes, it was a terrible mistake in hindsight, actually having him appointed. I always thought it was
disgrace,
a terrible move and a disgrace, and he's the wrong person. I can see why they did it, but it speaks to weakness, it speaks to appeasement, it speaks to delusion and the failure to have any kind of strategic purpose or backbone or to make difficult decisions. But that's the inflection point we are at with our domestic politicians. But now all of this happening should be a trigger to finally pull their heads out of their butts and do what's right. I don't hold out any hope that they will, but this is what we're saying must happen. Let's continue that tomorrow, because I think the collapse of NATO and the impending land assault, things will become a lot clearer in the current days about where this is heading. For today, though, that's probably all we got time for.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, folks, we, meaning Jonathan and I and others, are not going to stop yelling and screaming and saying what should be done. Whether or not it's done, that's not our problem. But we're going to tell you what we think should be done based on our experience and the information that we have. Because things are just in a very, very dark place right now. And I'm talking in terms of what's going on in Iran, what's going on in Europe, the UK, and certainly here in America. We're not going to shut up. So hopefully that's okay with you. If it's not, scroll, keep going. Internet's a huge place. But if you do like to hear what we're saying, we would love to have you back and subscribe. Also, my channel, No Delusion Zone, go there on YouTube and subscribe as well. So I'm going to go now because my voice is about.
Our voices are both packing in. I'll just say a quick thank you to everyone who's added helpful comments today. We've had no trolls, which is fantastic. We've had some brilliant comments, and we've had our fantastic moderators keeping an eye out for that as well.
Thank you.
Cheryl, BME, Radical Eye, Viggo Holmson has joined us. We've had some great people on that stream today, as well as Mythic Plague and others. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.